How are you doing, Shae Frichette from Frichette Winery?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Gorgeous day,
Okay.
inauguration day.
Happy Inauguration
Sun
Day.
is out over here. So over
Oh,
here in
good.
Eastern Washington.
You're in Red Mountain, Benton City?
Yeah. So we are right outside the Tri-Cities.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I just kind of wanted to get started with our conversation. We want to link up with, POC small business owners in the industry and just build a community. Um,
Awesome.
so I did see that you started your tasting room in 2013,
Yeah.
but you had a vintage from 2011.
Right.
So
Yeah,
tell us a little
there's a
bit
little bit
about
of a
that.
runway for wine. So we started with making the wine first, and then because it sat in barrel for 2 years, and so we had 2 years to kind of find a place. So yeah, found that special place on Red Mountain.
But you also have Sashay. So
Yes.
you are the owner of Sashay. Why did you choose to create?
So I went to so Greg and I both make the wine for Frechette, although some of the key decisions being made, he does lead on that because he was the one that went through the enology program initially. So that's why we agree that he has a technical knowledge. He would do that. But I mean, for me, I just went to the school of hard knocks. So I just kind of learned as I went and then took some studies, but mostly just kind of getting my hands dirty. And I was really behind the scenes on the winemaking and production. And then one year I was looking for, I was just like, I'm kind of in a rut. I really want something to inspire me, just kind of light my fire. And so I went just Google like retreats or getaways or, something I could just like pack a bag and travel to and just be forced to look at things in different perspective. And I came across this event called Celebration of Black Women in Wine. And I went, wait, what? So kind of read a little bit more about it and right away purchased a ticket and booked a flight to go to this event. The event was in Miami. It was absolutely beautiful. And for the first time, I'd seen Black women who own wine brands and Black female winemakers. And that inspired me because I'd never seen a Black female winemaker or a Black female wine brand owner. And I didn't know that I could be so inspired. There was an internal fire that was lit inside me. And, I knew that I had a vision for what I wanted a wine to be. And so on the trip from Miami back to the Tri-Cities, I created Sashay. And I mean, I created what she would look like, what this wine would taste like. I knew what message I wanted to say. I knew I wanted something to be on the back of the bottle that any woman could read and be inspired by. I mean, it just kind of the fire in me was lit so well that I just created this brand in that 5-hour flight from Miami back to the Tri Cities. So Sashay was born on an Alaskan Airlines flight.
That's amazing. That's truly, inspirational.
What was that community like? Because I imagine it's really difficult to connect with it on a regular basis. And when you talk about the inspiration, because we like certainly I think Gracie and our whole team can kind of relate for sure. We don't have a lot of wine presence in terms of Filipino winemakers, and so we're really excited to hear about did you get to talk about some of the struggles that y'all face? Do you still stay in connection with that? And I love that a brand kind of is born from some of that that energy, because we have a lot of that, a very similar sort of resonance with our community here. So I'm very curious on how that spilled into the wine.
At the event, it was more celebratory on, yay. So there are people of color and there are Black women, making wine. And for me, the vibe there was like, oh my God, I didn't even know you existed. And this is amazing. And I want to support you and I want to follow you. And I think that, as we celebrated, there was also this well, why, why haven't we heard of you? And then you start to kind of talk about the challenges in, getting into distribution and getting brands, getting these brands being picked up and having, being invited to the table, being a part of, some of the events that, certain brands are specifically invited to be a part of. And so we got into some of that, but most of it really was celebratory. And I think once we went back to our respective areas and started to build a better network and chatting with each other and finding more, finding that there were little pockets of Black winemakers and people of color, brown skin winemakers. I think that was just like, well, wow, there's not a whole lot of us, but there are enough of us that we really can unify and we really can have a voice and say, hey, we're doing some things over here too. Oh, there's a table over here and things are happening. How can we get a spot at those tables? And so I think that for, in the past, I would call it 5 years, we've seen like this emerging of, of more Black people in wine. But, it's still, we're really scraping the tip of the iceberg. And I think this past year, a lot of things have come to light and have bubbled to the surface on just the lack of opportunity, or that there is there is an opportunity to have brown people at the table and in the dialogue. And I think in the wine industry, we're really starting to wake up and notice that we need to make some change.
Definitely. I mean, I think too, a lot of it comes down to education and access to, wine education and wine opportunities like that.
Right.
So seeing, POC members in the community banding together to create those educational outlets and things like that, it's really just starting, I feel like.
Oh yeah, I agree. I definitely agree, Gracie.
It's so interesting to talk to professionals in different parts of the hospitality industry, the food and beverage industry, because I, coming from a perspective of restaurants, connecting that with our communities and our culture, it's almost like on many fronts that we have these battles in terms of BIPOC communities. I think that the first one, I think, is the profession itself, having that diversity, the representation, having people that look like us to be able to reach out to feel like we're not islands, to not have that sort of, sometimes I think you can run into imposter syndrome too when you can be in in an industry that's dominated by, predominantly, in terms of white folk. Really, it's dominated very much so by that. And obviously it's also old world too, when you talk about wine specifically. And, you have this historical, which is so interesting because obviously and then you have one of the great wine regions is like South Africa, but then a lot of those producers are white producers. And, you have all kinds of social, there's so many parts to it. And I think the profession is really interesting. And then it's, I'm curious also too, and like what has been the on the receiving end of the community for, like, as an example, like Filipinos, they drink wine, but I wouldn't say like for our culture, we're known as a wine drinking culture, like you would maybe, if you're an Italian or French or, from other places. And so I'm curious on how that has been played in, if you've had that experience.
I think that for, there's dialogue around, wine has, and I think probably still has the reputation of being like this elite product that only, certain people fit in with talking about it and drinking it, and maybe even purchasing it. And so I think that those have maybe been some probably very real barriers. I do think that when it comes to my own community, there are a lot of buyers and consumers that have been out there. I mean, there are brands that have, wine brands that have, you know, POC consumers. They just have never shown them in their advertising or, or haven't done any direct marketing towards this group, but they've been out there. But I think in general with wine, there is this mission probably in the BIPOC community to not to have wine not be so complicated and so intimidating, because somewhere along the line that's what it has become. Only the elite can have it. It's just one of these beverages that is way more complicated, and you have to be rich and educated in order to enjoy it. But as we're kind of looking and putting our feelers out, you have folks in my own community that are just like, well, I've been drinking wine for a really long time, and but I think now when it comes to, if you're following any, some of the larger brands, it's very interesting, because now you're seeing that the pictures that they're posting on Instagram and Facebook and in their marketing campaigns and in magazines, they look very different than they looked even a year ago. I mean, very different. And so I think that you have some of these brands that are hearing things loud and clear and are making these changes to be more inclusive in their marketing efforts.
Just people are more aware and are changing the way they do things.
Yeah.
Words don't really matter if there's no action.
Exactly. Right? Amen, Gracie.
And can you talk a little bit about how this past year has been? I mean, even, as you're growing, how did you deal with the pandemic?
Yeah, well, we are about 99% direct to consumer. We have a very, very, very small percentage of wholesale. And so what we rely on are our wine club members purchasing wine from us, and then folks walking through the door. Well, when we had the stay-at-home order in March, I mean, there's nobody walking through our door. So that means like a large percentage of the traditional way that we do business just didn't exist anymore. And we quickly had to, just like every business, had to figure out how we stay relevant and how we still sell wine in this market. So like most folks, fortunately, we started off when we opened in 2013, we started off hosting virtual tasting experiences. We just didn't continue it. And so we already knew the technology. We knew how to do it. I came from a background of corporate training. I'd done webinars before. So we jumped in right away and came up with an event called a mystery wine challenge, where you get a bottle. Actually, it looks like this. I have this coming up. This is for a company I'm doing it for. So the bottle has a label on it that's covered. This is for a corporate organization I'm doing it for. So the label's covered, and then we get on a 1-hour virtual experience where we teach you how to blind taste, and then you guess what the wine is. So we jumped into that offering right away, and it took off. And then the second thing we did is we came up with some creative ways to do wine pickup. And so we just had some, you come up our long driveway, there's trivia along the way before you get to us. And if you get the answer, you stand in your car and you're purchasing wine while you're in your car. But if you get the answer right, you're honking your horn, our team's going crazy. So we tried to come up with things like that. And once we were able to go into outdoor tastings, we just totally rocked with that. The Liquor Control Board worked with us to alter our license so that we can use more spaces on our property. And I mean, we hit the ground running. We were able to offer tastings, in our vineyard and in another shaded area on our property. And our team quickly just learned the ropes. And I mean, we were really inspired. If it wasn't for the changes that we had to make, we probably would have never utilized some of the beautiful areas on our property, because at first it was like, that's too far to walk down there. We got to get wine, we got to schlep wine all the way down there. And then it became, wow, as we were walking, we could walk our guests down, and that's actually like a mini tour that they get of our property, and we can talk about what the grapes are doing. So, so it became a year of a lot of just innovative thinking and some fantastic solutions to really keep us, you know, to keep us going. We were down significantly from a revenue standpoint, down significantly from the goals that we had set for the year. But overall, we have some amazing loyal wine club members and loyal customers who were just as dedicated to keeping us open as we were. And so, you know, it was a good year seeing people come to bat for Frichette.
I love hearing how the community can come together to support, you know, things that I'm care about. And I'm curious on how you know, moving to Washington and not being able to go to South Carolina. I'm curious on how the community has, you know, how has it been in terms of like the sharing, whether that be the consumers or even like the fellow winemakers or the neighbors that you talked about, you know, 80,000 and all that. Has it been pretty welcoming? Have there been challenges to connect more with the Northwest? How's that?
You know, I would say that from a welcoming standpoint, our community was very welcoming, and the Washington wine industry as a whole, for the most part, has been very welcoming and you know, proactive and welcoming new wineries. That's just kind of how the Washington wine industry is. You know, I'll volunteer this information on the part that may not have been as welcoming, was where folks weren't really used to, you know, seeing like a Black person in leadership in wine. And that was, you know, that came from folks who, you know, were a part of, you know, like a wine buyer who was there to see in their mind the winemaker, you know, traditionally what the winemaker looks like. And so, you know, you walk into a room and you see me pouring the wine, and it's more just like, oh yeah, I really kind of wanted to talk to the winemaker, you know, I really wanted to talk to, you know, the person, you know, the owner. And so I think for me, like from another professional in wine, that you know, that became a little you know, that was interesting. And then the other thing too is, you know, even when I would show up to share Frichette wine, you know, we really didn't get, for me, I really didn't get many folks to connect back to me until this year, you know, when I think there were businesses who were just like, well, wait a minute, you don't have, you know, you say that you're diverse, you have no Black people or no people of color in any of your advertising. You don't have any wines by people of color on your shelves. And I think that was when it was interesting that folks are like, oh, you know, great. And I'm like, how did you treat me before? You know, Frichette may not be a fit for, you know, I never take no's, you know, that personally, because to be on Red Mountain, you know, we went and knocked on dozens of doors to find a spot because there was nothing for sale. And so we experienced a lot of no's just from that. And for me, a no is just like, well, it's not a fit, you know, most of the time it's not a fit for now. But, you know, I just kind of sense that for some folks, when I approached for wine, or even an event where they're there to determine what wines they're going to bring in, you know, Frichette wasn't taken as seriously because I was behind the table. So Greg and I have had conversations about that. And I just, you know, would say to him that, you know, there were some opportunities where I was like, well, maybe you should be behind the table, or maybe you should, you know, pour the wine for this. And he was a big advocate of me and saying, you're just as relevant to this brand as I am, and we're not going to play this game that way. So that was something that I've always appreciated about him.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, something that I think that when you live in the Northwest, that is like quote unquote like this has a lot of liberal. I don't know what to say. Like on the surface, there's so much underneath that. I think so. Thank you for talking about that.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why we wanted to start doing these Zoom calls and just connect to other BIPOC small businesses and just talk to people about their experiences as BIPOC small business owners. And just, see what's working for people, see what's not working, and just build that community because, we're stronger together. So thank you again so much for agreeing to talk with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we love your wines. We're drinking the 19 Semillon right now. And we really want to try Sashay. So I'll reach out to you about that.
Yeah, the
thank you
Sashay is
again.
fun.
I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.